Welcome back to Melbourne Property TV. On tonight's panel, we're discussing developing a property and how important choice of block, planning and design are. Joining me from the projectfacilitator.com.au, Peter Bozinoski. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you.
From the REIV, Robert LaRocca. And from Archie Centre, David Hallett.
Yes.
Gentlemen, who wants to kick off?
I'll kick off.
Oh, all right, off you go.
I'll kick off with a cliche, because there are a few of them in property, but this one's a really good one for this topic, which is location is everything. Often when people talk about location, they think what suburb you're in, but location can also mean where in the street you are, where in the suburb you are. Location is everything when it comes to real estate. You don't want to develop a block that is located in the wrong spot in relation to public transport, or a block that you can't access easily. Location is a key consideration if you're buying a block for development.
And orientation, David, is that important as well?
Yeah, look, location's paramount. That's what buys and sells property, and that's really the thing that you'd be looking for first and foremost. But beyond that, I think we'd be talking orientation, the optimum orientation if you're looking to develop a property, whether you're putting a home on it or perhaps a small number of units, medium density development perhaps, would be to have north to the rear, because you can really get some nice winter sunshine into the living spaces of the building with a block that's oriented that way.
Think of it this way: if you're looking for a home, where would you buy, and where would you like to live? So when you're building your townhouses, etc., local transport, schools, primary, your hospitals or medical centres, shops, etc. I guess once you pinpoint your suburb location, and obviously that will be governed by your budget, and then it comes down to the more technical aspects of orientation of the block, north facing, backyards, where is the driveway. We've got to look at services in terms of, do we have a power pole in front of where we would like to relocate the driveway? Are there any Telstra pits at the front? Any easements on site? These are all the technical aspects. So you might find something that's in a great location, but from a practicality and technical point of view, it might not work. So you just really need to stand afar and just assess all those collectively. And
also liaising with council, I suppose, to find out how flexible they are on what you actually want to do.
Well, I'm not sure about flexibility, but look, I mean, anyone can go to council and check the local planning scheme, and the local council can advise the parameters around what they'd like to see and how you need to design your townhouses. But I must say, you need to investigate and also get a private consultant on board, and see what you can do and how far you can maybe stretch, the development in terms of a quality, a bigger. Sometimes not. A lot of people think, when you go to apply for a permit, bulk is a big issue, but you can have one substantial house on a property that's quite bulky, but you can have 3 well-designed homes or townhouses that are not as bulky because of the setbacks and the amount we need to put on there.
What about as far as design's concerned?
Well, as the guys have mentioned, you've really got to do some early homework around planning scheme provisions that are going to dictate what you can and can't do on that property. You shouldn't make any assumptions about what might be permissible. And as Peter mentioned too, checking the title out, checking for easements, checking for covenant controls. There's land out there that you can't build 2 dwellings on, for example, or swimming pools. And of course, if you're looking to purchase a property with the intention of developing it for 2 or 3 townhouses or units, and you've got a covenant on the title that restricts that, then you've got a problem. You're going to have to work your way around that. So doing some early homework around what is and isn't possible on that piece of land is absolutely critical if you've got something in mind.
And Peter, do you find people are fairly naive about this when they come to you? Do you get people who come to you and say, well, we've bought a block, now we want to develop it, and
Sure.
You think this is a nightmare?
Well, my first question is, let me have a look at your title, and that's the first start. And I'll say, well, this is a Section 32, we've just bought it. There have been cases where there is a covenant, and
how do they take that news?
Well,
just for my own
look, not very well.
Interest?
Not very well. Especially, I had a gentleman late last year that had 2,000 square metres in the eastern suburbs he bought. And then I had to tell him that you can only, it's 1 per 800 square metres. One house per 800 square metres a block, but he wanted to do like 8 or 9 townhouses. It wasn't going to happen.
So, what did that leave him? The option of just selling, or?
Well, yeah, he's just reconsidering his position. So getting the initial advice and paying for the right advice is paramount. you've got to think of it, development is a business. If you're not going to treat it like a business, then you're doomed for failure.
Not a hobby.
Definitely not a hobby.
You know, people buy and sell property infrequently, and so you look at that and then you look at the number of people who actually go on to seek to develop the property, and there's even fewer in that. So it's a specialisation. That's why the trades exist and the professions exist to assist people, and getting the homework up front is right. Peter raised before about, you know, getting the right title, getting the right block, knowing what's underneath it as well. And it's worth noting that, you know, even if the block's not exactly what you're after, good design can actually pick up and fix some of those problems. So it's always worth investing in quality professional advice, because it can turn something that is maybe not quite, you know, suitable for development into something that can turn out to be really, really good. And good design does provide good outcomes financially later on down the track. Well-designed property might be the difference between someone buying it, you know, in 10 years or not. So it's worth investing in that sort of thing.
And just because you discover there's an easement here and something here, so it doesn't mean someone who knows what they're doing can't work their way through it and solve the problems.
No, not at all. It doesn't make it impossible by any means. It becomes a constraint perhaps, but it's a constraint that you can quite often work with, as Rob said. We've always taken the view that whether you're renovating or building a new home, knocking one over to build another one, developing units or townhouses, you're a property developer. Now, you may not regard yourself as a property developer, but you are developing that property in some way, and no self-respecting or successful property developer is going to go into a project like that without doing some homework, without checking out the controls on the site, without getting some sort of feasibility study organised that's going to give them a sense of what's it going to cost and what am I likely to get back, is it all worthwhile, before they start spending too much money.
Every property in the state has an easement, and if you haven't got an easement, well, you're one of the few. So a lot of these things you need to identify, and then so you can understand or try and find a solution how to actively, you know, solve that problem if you've got an easement, etc. You know, so if you've got an easement and there is a power pole at the front, obviously there are those parameters you've got to get around, and with a good design and prior planning before you buy, it is achievable. But certainly, as you said, don't discount a property if it's got an easement. Just be aware of what that means in terms of what you're trying to do.
Do your homework. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with more Melbourne Property TV in just a moment.